Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to conduct some more experiments with the Squishy Gel by Sophie and Toffee. This is the one that comes in their squishy boxes, but we also get a little bit of this in Elle's box when they introduced it. And I thought, I wanted to test out some more how it behaves with other materials and all that, what it bonds to and so on and so forth. So far we know that you kind of always want to use a separator to get it out of silicone molds easier, since it does kind of stick to them, but it also sticks to rubber molds a little bit. Now the paw mold that we have, I think, is a rubber mold, kind of like the chocolate mold, because there is rarely a silicone mold that thin. Usually they are rubber, and most chocolate molds and stuff are some kind of rubber. It still kind of bonds with silicone, but not as much as the usual soft silicone molds that we have, which is why the paws usually, in my experience, definitely are a bit easier to demold even without a separator. Now I'm mixing up just some standard squishy gel here. I like in these smaller ones to use my little scale. It just makes things way easier and I can really make sure that I get the ratios right. And I'm just mixing in some of their pigment just to give it some colors. Now the first thing I want to try is if you can pour resin on top. I don't think it will hold, but we shall see and test, because if it's truly a silicone base, then it will obviously not stick to the resin. So I'm usually just really slowly mixing any kind of silicone based or squishy gel based materials, since it introduces less air bubbles. And then I'm just using my stick to help me guide it into the little paw pads. I decided to use this mold since it has all the divots for me to experiment with different materials and separate them out. And it's a classic shape that we know works in this kind of type of pour. So I'm adding these little paws, and then I'm also letting this cure fully. I'm leaving it out for at least 2 days before I'm mixing up my resin, and I'm just going with some 1-to-1 ratios of Sophie and Toffee resin and mixing in some black Morandi pigment before I'm pouring it in. I didn't want to fully pour the thickness, I just really want to cover it. I don't need to waste too much resin for this. And afterwards it was just time to let it rest and cure. And after 2 days, when it was fully cured, I pulled it out and demolded it, and of course, what happened? Yeah, you will be able to see pretty quickly. It actually immediately left the paw pads behind. You can even see why I'm doing this. It just cleanly pops off. It actually leaves a really smooth surface where the back of the paw pads were. And these actually come out pretty decently. They don't rip, you just really have to be careful. Now, this mold is a bit older, so the surface is also a bit more rough. You can kind of see, especially on the resin part, that it is not quite smooth, so the silicone sticking on it is mainly also due to the mold just being a bit more old. And of course I wanted, to try and make it work somewhat, so I thought of a way to adhere them. And my first thought was, these things like to stick to smooth surfaces, so I just used some rubbing alcohol, cleaned up the paw pad, and stuck it on there, and it kind of holds, but it also moves around while you're squishing it. So my next idea was glue. Now, I'm not going to use any flexible glue. I'm using the first and simplest glue that came to mind when it comes to things that stick to silicone, and that is super glue. I know that silicone definitely sticks with super glue because I may have ruined a silicone mat or two before with leaking super glue. So I'm using this gel type since it doesn't run off, and I make sure to actually roughen up the surface with a sanding stick a bit before on the resin because it's way too smooth to hold this. And yeah, we shall see the results once it's dry. Now my next experiment, I wanted to see if normal, a bit harder type silicone, this is a 13 I think, actually holds the squishy gel, and it does. Now you may have noticed that the pop pads I poured, they have shrunk, and that is one thing I noticed that usually my silicone doesn't do. These pads that I made with the squishy gel, they shrink, and like everything else, it shrinks. I left it actually like for a week in the mold because I knew I had another thing to pour with my other silicone, so I didn't want to, you know, make two mix-ups. And this actually got into the vacuum chamber, so, you know, that kind of fit. And yeah, it shrank. It still bonded pretty nicely though. So my next experiment was in terms of squishiness, so I mixed up a variety of different shore hardness. So I have 32 on the full-on left, and then I'm going in with 1300, that's the one I have right now, and then I'm going to put on the full-on right pop pad, toe pad, I guess. I'm going to put the squishy gel just to compare. Now ignore the thickness of this. I actually had another like mold where I needed this silicone to be a bit more set. I don't know if the video is already out, maybe, but I made a little like rupee from Zelda, and it needed to have slightly set silicone since it was like a two-part clamping mold. So I decided to just, you know, use the rest of that color pink and put it in here for also adding the shore hardness 13, and then I'm adding the squishy gel. And all of these just have the same mica powder pigment. I know that the pigment for the squishy gel also works in silicone. I just don't know if it works in all of my silicones, and I didn't want to test it right now. I may in the future, but since, as I said, I had some other pours with that, you know, and I just used the same color, it was easier for me to do it this way. Plus I like the swirliness you get. And then on the back I'm using the shore hardness 13, since it's still a bit flexible but not too flexible, so it will give me a nice base for it to not like slip on the table, and it should bond nicely. Now in between some of these pours there has been a week again, and I think I may have not properly protected it. I did put a piece of paper on top, but I think there's still some dust that got in there because everything besides the practically freshly poured squishy gel, yeah, you can see it basically peeled off. And actually the other silicones sit a bit too long in the mold, and it ripped out a couple of chunks of some of them. But, you know, that happens. The mold is, as I said, a bit rough, and this silicone is a bit stronger, so I can imagine that while it hardened, it like affected the mold as well a little bit. But as you can see, the squishy gel definitely holds up really well to this silicone. I know the others stick together, so that was literally just a fault with me and the dust. But again, you can glue it with super glue. Now, super glue will leave a hard surface. It's not flexible, but with these thicker parts, I don't have any worries that it will actually, you know, hold for quite a while. If you have thinner parts, I wouldn't actually suggest you use super glue. Although I don't know what I would use. I wonder if there's like some kind of silicone glue. I bet there is. But yeah, in this case, super glue again was the easiest, and it actually worked pretty well, and I'm using this constantly as a squishy since like weeks now, because this experiment took quite a while. Actually been working on this for over 2-3 months, I don't know anymore. But in the end it was definitely a bit informative, so, you know, it was kind of worth it. But yeah, just this time I needed to wait a bit longer for this to dry, and in the end, here you can see the results in comparison to the squishiness. Now, one thing that is notable is that the squishy gel is almost as squishy as the shore hardness 00. Now, I know that most squishy gels actually are based on that silicone type, on the 00. And they usually, like, some can be a little bit softer than the 00 hardness silicone, but they're all like the same base, and it seems at this point that this really is the same. It feels the same squishiness. The only thing that my silicone doesn't do is that it shrinks over time in the mold, or in general, but that is totally fine if you don't, you don't really need accurate pieces. I wouldn't suggest using the squishy gel as a replacement for mold making, especially if you want to have the mold for a long time. I guess you can use it, but yeah, it will definitely change. Now here you can actually see how similar these are. These are just the pucks that were left in the containers, and actually one of them is a bit thinner, so it's a bit harder to squish evenly. But the squish is practically the same. Like, I can see that the squishy gel is just a teeny tiny bit softer, but not really much noticeably. And this is the shear hardness 13, and it's absolutely like kind of like a rock, and the feeling of squishiness. So it's way too hard in comparison. I just wanted to show you guys the leftovers. But this is very satisfying to play with. I like the variety in the ball pads with the different hardnesses, because you get also like a bit of a different surface texture. So, what did we learn out of it? Well, first of all, it seems that the squishy gel is silicone-based. Second of all, it doesn't adhere to resin, but you kind of can brute force it with some glue. It just, may not hold up as long. All of these are pretty satisfying to play with, but I definitely like the ones more where I have the paw itself, like the backing of it, a bit harder in texture. Because it just makes the paw pads feel, I don't know, I feel like they feel more squishy. Like, if you would fill the full paw with the squishy gel, I'm pretty sure you get a really satisfying, squishy ball out of it. But I do like these kind of desktop fidgets. If you remember the Cat Cafe one, I did pour the cats and stuff as squishies, and I have this cat on my desk for quite a while, and just having it sit on my desk and while I'm doing some tasks on my PC, using one hand to fidget with it while it's on the desk, it was very satisfying. Much more so since you can immediately, move your hand over and do another task. I feel like if you have a squishy in your hands, like a squishy ball or something, you have to put it down every time and then pick it back up, while if it's on your desk, you can just, play around with it and then just move over. And, I think, in general, when I'm working, that is more of my preferred style of using squishies or fidget, just as something that I can, quickly leave aside, do the task at hand if I need both hands to, type or something. And these are excellent for that. I absolutely love them for that. So, yeah, now you know. If you want to make a multicolored or multi-textured one, just use a different silicone. I don't know if all silicones will work. I know that some silicones don't really like to bond with others, but in this case mine worked, and I can imagine that a lot of them will work anyways. And of course, it being silicone, that means that it explains why the molds are sticking a bit more and why you want to use the separator thing. And of course, why the silicone mats bend a little bit. Usually in most silicones, when you have a negative form spilling onto another silicone, the activator in that can mess the silicone up a bit on which it spills to, and it likes to warp or something, especially with thin mats. So, try to always use some hard surface or something that is not silicone based as your surface to work on. But anyways, let me know in the comments down below if you have any more ideas of what you want to see me test on the squishy gel, or if you have anything that you tested and figured out about this gel that, I may not have picked up on in my previous videos about it. And as always, hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!